Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe P. Zapia, and today we're going to look ahead to Week 11, look at the ranks for wide receiver. Our good friend Pat Fitzmaurice is always here to join us to talk about his rankings. He is a rankings monster. Just go look at that ECR. He is quite good. Although somebody, as I said in the last show, somebody was ahead of him in Week 10. You got to give me this one time, Pat. This is my moment in the sun. After this, it's all downhill. But Jacob Gibbs is back joining us again from CBS Fantasy, from SportsLine, does amazing work over there. We're so happy he's back. We're going to jump right in to the questions here. And we know you've all got questions, so I'm going to press the guest here, Jacob, right at the top. And I want to talk about Kadarius Toney. Obviously, with the issues we've had here, with Juju Smith-Schuster, with the concussion, with Mecole Hardman being out last week, I know everybody's very excited about more and more upside for Kadarius Toney. Do you think that's something we're going to see in Week 11? And do you think rest of season he is going to be one of these guys that turns out being a league winner, or maybe we're just overranking him a little too much?
I think that the potential is there for him to be a league winner. So this week, obviously the big toss-up was him or Christian Watson. I think there's more upside with Watson, more of a clear path to a fantasy relevant role. But the ability is there for Toney. We saw him be targeted at one of the highest rates in the NFL last year. On a per route basis, he was targeted a similar rate to like A.J. Brown, Devonta Adams, Cooper Kupp. He was right up there with the absolute best. And he's, potentially stepping into a Chiefs offense that doesn't really have a clear target hog beyond Travis Kelce. No one else, even Juju, on a per route basis hasn't really drawn, or even a target share basis hasn't drawn targets at a significantly high rate. So the potential is there. I don't know how quickly he's really going to become acclimated to the offense, ever be a full-time player. But he's definitely worth an ad. And I think this is a spot against LA in a potential shootout where they've been getting the ball and they've been being intentional about getting him, involved, even though he doesn't know all the plays yet. And he's been productive when he's got the ball. So I would expect them to continue to go back to him this week. I'm really excited about Toney.
All right, let's see how excited the guys are to talk about the players we have and the discrepancies they have between their rankings. We're going to start with the guys that Pat likes more than Jacob. Amari Cooper, wide receiver 12 this week. You've got him, Jacob, at 17. Consensus is at 14. So, Pat, let's talk about Amari Cooper. I know we're getting closer and closer every single week to returning Deshaun Watson. So, before we get that, let's take another quick look here at Amari Cooper's value. They're going on the road at Buffalo. The home road splits have been drastic, to say the least, when it comes to Amari Cooper this year. So, how confident are you in Amari Cooper this week?
Oh, not immensely confident because the usage trends have been going in the wrong direction, like double-digit targets in 4 of Amari Cooper's first 6 games, and then just 14 targets over his last 3 games. Plus maybe David Njoku comes back this week. Donovan Peoples-Jones has gotten very involved lately. And, we're not the Bills' secondary has been getting gradually healthier, so it's possible they're closer to full strength this week, and it's a tough matchup even if they're not quite at full strength. The Browns like to run the ball. There's sort of a lot going against potentially Amari Cooper here, but ultimately, I do think he's a darn good player, Joe. And I looked at this ranking, like, how do I have him up at wide receiver 12 as like a back end wide receiver 1? But then I realized like how many good wide receivers are on bye this week. You've got Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle for Miami, Metcalf and Lockett for Seattle, Christian Kirk for Jacksonville, Evans and Godwin for Tampa. So I guess that kind of explains it. Like I would generally have him in wide receiver 2 range, but in a week where so many wide receiver 1s and wide receiver 2 are off the table for you, I guess it elevates him. I think you're playing Amari Cooper no matter what this week. And maybe wide receiver 12 is a smidge high, but I think he's a starter for most people under most circumstances.
And Jacob, to Pat's point, we were just recently discussing about, well, it's not the worst week for buys for running backs, but wide receivers is a little bit of a different story. There's definitely some guys that we're missing here. That being said, when you look at Amari Cooper and you're looking at, some of the injuries that Buffalo had last week on the defensive side, they were missing guys like Rousseau, Milano, Hoyer, obviously losing that game at home, losing 2 in a row here. Certainly, I would say that Buffalo has a sense of urgency. Do you think that works negatively when it comes to Amari Cooper in this passing game?
Yeah, I'm really worried about Cooper in this spot. I think you probably are starting him if you have him, but if you've got somebody like Alan Lazard, Chris Olave, even Tyler Boyd, or even like Christian Watson, Garrett Wilson, I think you could consider starting those guys over him because it's really not a good matchup. The Bills play a ton of zone coverage, and Amari Cooper has some of the most pronounced man versus zone splits in the NFL. And so you want to be, starting him in those man-heavy matchups. But even last week, in what should have been a great matchup on paper against the Dolphins, who play man at one of the highest rates in the NFL, we saw that it was Donovan Peoples-Jones who took advantage of that matchup. And that's been a problem for Amari Cooper. So Peoples-Jones had the big week 1, and then Jacoby Brissett just forgot that he existed for 2 weeks. And since then, he has 70 or more yards in 5 of 6 games. He has 50-plus yards in every single game since then. And over that time, over the past 6 games, Peoples-Jones has 40 targets. Amari Cooper has 42. Peoples-Jones has 446 receiving yards. Amari Cooper has 366. I think Cooper's still the wide receiver 1, but it's if you just look at their stats, you wouldn't guess that.
Yeah, that's great data points there on them. Let's talk about another guy, too, who's the wide receiver 2 in his team is Devonta Smith. Pat's got him as wide receiver 19. Jacob, you've got him at 26, so pretty good size variance there. ECR is right with you, Pat, at 19. So, Pat, let's talk about Smith. Another, again, team coming off disappointment. We're talking about that. Well, the Eagles are certainly disappointed. They're playing the Colts this week. We've discussed earlier, too, about what our faith is in the Colts continuing to do what they did in the previous week with their first game with Jeff Saturday. But here we go on the road in a get-right game for the Eagles. Do you see Devonta Smith having something that looks more like those big 20-point games that he's had earlier this season, or something more like the single-digit games we saw in Week 8 and Week 9?
Boy, Joe, I'm above ECR on all these guys you're picking out for me to try to defend when I'm going to have a hard time defending them. Like, I do have some concerns here. It is a tough matchup. The Indy secondary is good. Since week 4, Devonta Smith is averaging 7.5 yards per catch.
Yeah.
And last year's average depth of target was 13.9 yards. This year it's 7.9. But
half almost. Wow.
Here is the buts. The Dallas Goedert injury. Like, I think Devonta Smith is the gainer from the Goedert injury, especially with these shorter routes that he's been running this year. Like, I think he is going to be the guy primarily picking up the slack, because I don't know if, Jack Stoll and Grant Calcaterra are going to do it at tight end. So, like, Devonta Smith was already on pace for 87 catches this year. Like, I know not as high a value to those catches with such, turning into a short area receiver and averaging 7.5 yards a catch over the last 6 weeks or whatever it is. But I don't know, with the Goddard injury, maybe like Devonta Smith could possibly make a run at 100 catches this season. So I think he's going to be busier because of that Goddard injury.
It's a great point, Pat. Jacob, do you agree that Dallas Goedert's injury means a boom for the value of Smith?
It could. I've done some studies on this, and tight end targets and wide receiver targets often do not really correlate at all. But it definitely could, just because of the average route depths and average depth of targets, respectively, for the two players. I think Pat nailed it, really. He hit on all the concerns that I have with Smith. It's mostly about the routes that he's running. There's just not very much upside. Here are his receiving yardage totals in his most recent games: 39, 22, 23, 44, 87, and 17. That's pretty brutal for a player as explosive as him. He's just really being limited by the role. So yeah, I don't need to be any negative about him anymore. I feel like Pat did it really well, did my job for me here. I just did want to say that I'm pretty sure the last time I was on the podcast, Pat was also higher on Devonta Smith. And if I remember right, it was right before his 31-point game against Washington.
So we should listen to Pat.
Yeah, take that for what it's worth. Pat's good.
I want to go back to your study about the correlation of the vacated targets by tight ends for a second, because you piqued my interest. If it doesn't go to the other wide receivers, does it go to running backs, or does it just disintegrate into more rushing?
I didn't have the time to do like a full study and write an article about it and seek out all of these pathways that come from it. Like, where does it go then? I just remember looking at it quickly. I don't remember why, but there was a tight end that was out this offseason, and we were talking about, well, would this mean more targets for this short yardage guy? And the evidence I found was that no, that hasn't been the case, but I don't necessarily. I'll do it this offseason and I'll get back to you.
All right, there you go. There's your summer project, and you get back to me next year on the show. We do it. Let's talk about George Pickens, one of my favorite guys. Pat's got him at wide receiver 21. Jacob's got him at 31. Not too big of a variance. ECR is right kind of in the middle of 30. Pat, Look, we talked about this on Monday on the BP show. We talked about, I think that Pittsburgh's going to hang. Pittsburgh has given the Bengals all they can handle on more than one occasion the last 2 years. And I think they're looking forward to this matchup here, especially with the Chase injury. So do you think that Pickens here is in a spot to really deliver maybe more than a wide receiver 2 game?
Yeah, possibly. Let me ask you, Joe and Jacob, do you have Pickens or Deontay Johnson ranked higher this week?
Jacob, do you have yours up?
Yeah, pretty clearly Deontay for me.
I will pull mine up right here. It's a great question because I remember thinking, where do I want to put the 2 of them?
Yeah.
I've got Pickens. Where are you, George Pickens? I actually have Pickens. Yes, I have him 2 spots behind Deontay Johnson right now, but I'm struggling with that.
Deontay wide receiver 24, Pickens at 31.
Yeah, so I've got Pickens 27, Deontay 28, and Deontay is an excellent possession receiver, no question about it. But man, that role was so much more valuable, even with a badly decaying Ben Roethlisberger, than it has been with Kenny Pickett. And no touchdowns for Deontay this year, no 100-yard games. He's only had 1 game with more than 63 receiving yards. And it's just been a lot of empty PPR calories for him. I don't know. As for Pickens, I mean, he is going to run pretty much all of his snaps against either Eli Apple or rookie Cam Britt-Smith. So very favorable individual matchups against the Bengals, who are still missing Awuzie. And I just think Pickens is going to continue his ascent to stardom. We saw them try to get him involved in the running game a little bit last week, got a TD run out of it. So this dude is just a playmaker, and I'm bullish on him. And if I've got him, I'm trying to squeeze him into a flex spot at the very least. I just love this guy.
All right. So obviously the one real bad game there against the Eagles, we all know what happened there. But outside of that, we've seen Pickens, it feels like most weeks, really continue to build that rapport here. So what are your thoughts this week? I know you kind of touched on a little bit, Gibbs, but what else do you think about Pickens in this matchup specifically too? Because the Cincinnati Bengals corners, we know the injuries that are going on there. This is not a very good corner group.
I think there's some upside for Pickens. Just real quick on Deontay, I did want to hit on the role change. His average route depth has been 6 to 7 yards each of the past few seasons, but this year it's up to 9.3. His average depth of target is almost up to 11 yards. He's been used downfield a lot more than in past years. He has a 35% air yardage share on the year. So I think there's upside there. It seems hard to believe that a player as good as he is going to continue to just not ever produce on this type of volume. And he is getting the volume. He has a 26% target share, whereas George Pickens is not getting the volume at all. He's just not drawing targets. And particularly I'm concerned about, he's had some really good matchups. So the Bengals are a team that play a lot of man, and teams do attack downfield against them. They haven't been successful attacking it downfield against them, but that is how they've attacked this defense. So there's the potential for him to, play well here, but he had a great matchup against Miami just 3 weeks ago. And that was one of his best outings in over a month, but he didn't really take advantage of that the way I would have liked to. Same against the Saints, that has no pass rush and plays a lot of man defense. He didn't do much against it. I don't know. We keep hearing about how awesome Pickens is, but his per route data is really bad. He has a 14% target per route run rate on the year and a 1.1 yard per route run rate, and that's on a pretty large sample size. Okay. And I tend to trust that over hype.
Okay. All right. So not being fooled by the highlight reels. There you go. All right. Go ahead. You have something else ahead?
Yeah, I'm also still optimistic. This is only going to be a second game without Chase Claypool there. So I'm still hoping that funnels a few extra targets his way. I
just think Awuzie being out, Pat, is just such a huge loss because their corners weren't very deep to begin with, and losing him is huge. Yeah. Let's flip the script here and take a look at the other wide receivers that Jacob likes more than Pat. But before we do, I want to remind everybody we're giving away that Austin Eckler autographed jersey, fantasypros.com/contest. Go there right now and get involved, and you could win this Austin Eckler autographed jersey thanks to our good pals at pristineauction.com. All you have to do is go drop a 5-star review of the podcast wherever you get your pods. Go to Apple Podcasts, drop the review, talk about how much you love the show and how much the show loves you back, because we do. And don't forget, if you want extra ways to get more entries into the contest besides the review, follow us on social media, on TikTok, on Twitter, on Instagram at Fantasy Pros. Go do all that. You got 4 entries for that Eckler jersey. Let's go to Jacob's guys And let's start here with Courtland Sutton. Everybody's favorite except mine. Wide receiver 9, Jacob, you've got him at. Wide receiver 16s where Pat's holding strong. ECR's at 17. So let's talk about it. Let's talk a little bit about Courtland Sutton here. I know the matchup is good on paper. It's the Las Vegas Raiders. Okay. So sell me here on Courtland Sutton, because I don't know, man. It is just underwhelming in the dictionary. If you flip around, you'll see Courtland Sutton, and there's his face. What are your thoughts here? What can you do in week 11 against Vegas?
Yeah, you don't have to tell me. You're preaching to the choir. I actually was much, much lower on Courtland Sutton than everyone coming into the year. I actually had Jerry Jeudy ranked higher than him. And that's because
like
that's because when they've both been on the field, Jerry Jeudy has been the clear-cut wide receiver 1. And so I'm going to give you Sutton's splits here. And this is why we're tentatively in on Sutton this week, is if Judy's out, Courtland Sutton's usage has been that of like a top 8, top 10 type of receiver. So in 2022, with Jeudy on, Sutton has been targeted on 19% of his routes and averaged 1.2 yards per route run. With Jeudy off, he's been targeted on 26% of his routes, so 34% more likely to draw a target with Jeudy off. And he's been 1.93 times more efficient at yard per route run basis with Jeudy off the field this year. From 2020 to 2022, so Judy's entire career, Sutton has been 35% more likely to draw a target with Jeudy off. He's been 2.48 times more efficient yard per route run with Jeudy off. So that number has actually gone up over a larger sample size, which is really, really nuts. And so just for comparison, like you hear these rates, but you might not really look at them as much as I do probably. So you need some context. So his rates this year with Jeudy off are better than Amari Cooper, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and like just below AJ Brown, CeeDee Lamb, DeAndre Hopkins, those type of guys. That's the type of player we're talking about in a matchup against the Raiders. If Judy's out, I don't know how you don't have him as a top 10, top 12 guy.
I like it. You're putting business ahead of personal here. You've brought the stats and you brought the business. Pat, did he sell you on Courtland Sutton, at least for week 11?
Well, I mean, he makes the excellent point, but we should mention that Jeudy has not been ruled out yet. Although I too, like Jacob, am ranking Sutton as if Jeudy is going to be out, and I've got him as a high-end wide receiver too. Him getting 11 targets last week after Jeudy left on, I think it was the first play of the game. That's encouraging the matchup against the Raiders and encouraging their 32nd in DVOA against the pass. So like easy pickings on the matchup. And what Jacob mentioned about Sutton like crushing without Jeudy. Like we thought Sutton early last year after Jeudy got that high ankle sprain in week 1, Sutton goes out and just looks like an alpha receiver for the next month and a half, and everyone thought he was going to smash. Then Jeudy gets back and Sutton's like usage just disintegrated. Like it just disappeared. And as I don't know if it was on last week's show, I pointed out that like Sutton's decline this year sort of coincided with the debut of Greg Dulcich. Like the 3 or 4 games, like Sutton was doing well, and then all of a sudden Dulcich showed up and like Sutton disappeared. So the reason, like everything about the matchups and the situations with Amari Cooper and Courtland Sutton screams to me that Sutton should be ranked higher. I can't rank Sutton higher because I've seen these guys play, and I know that Amari Cooper is like twice the player that Courtland Sutton is. I mean, like that's kind of just, I don't know, man. Like that's such a superficial way to look at it.
No, but it is. Like
I no doubt in my mind that Amari Cooper's better. Yeah.
I think the best shows and the best analysis is always when you take the data and you take the real football and the eye test and you put them all together and you make your decisions off that, which is why I love our shows here, because we like to do that. So I think that's a good thing that we do that. Michael Pittman Jr., I have a whole rant ready about him on tomorrow's show. So get ready for that, everybody. That's what they call a tease in the business. Wide receiver 22, Jacob's got him. Pat's got him at 29. ECR's at 20. And I just looked, he actually moved him up to wide receiver 18 on the ECR. I think the Eagles corners are pissed. They are really good. And I think this is going to be a very rough situation. I know Matt Ryan's back under center, but this is one where I struggle here. So Jacob, you're gonna have to pull out all the data sheets and everything to sell me on Pittman this week, because I think the Eagles corners are going to take out their frustrations on the wide receivers of the Indianapolis Colts. But what do you think?
Yeah, I think you might be right. But we have seen a few wide receivers get by Darius Slayton. Terry McLaurin did it again.
He sure did.
Twice. Marquise Brown did it. Those guys aren't very similar players to Michael Pittman. I guess the closest comparison we have that has had a good game against them is Amon-Ra St. Brown. Because Pittman is really running, he's kind of like Devonta Smith. He's really running a very short route tree with Matt Ryan there. And that's kind of limited his upside. And so, yeah, actually, the more that I dug into this and thought about this, and actually thinking about Devonta Smith got me a little bit lower on Pittman because similar type of routes. And then also, I do think there's some potential that the Colts control this game on the ground, which would, then result in maybe not as much passing volume. So, yeah, I mean, I did move him down to wide receiver 22 behind like Garrett Wilson. But yeah, with Matt Ryan at quarterback, he's averaged 10 targets and 75 receiving yards. He just hasn't found the end zone. But if he does, like that's a really, really solid baseline, almost double-digit targets in every single game with Matt Ryan at QB. So the volume's there. I just don't know how much upside there is.
Pat, the volume is definitely going to be there. The question is, what is the upside in this matchup? So you're obviously a little on the opposite end here from the rankings. So talk to me about Michael Pittman, your expectations for him in Week 11.
Yeah, I'm sort of bearish on Pittman. And by the way, I'm glad to hear that Jacob is bullish on Garrett Wilson because I am too. I think we're both above consensus on him. I like to hear that. Yeah, I mean, the switch from Sam Ehlinger back to Matt Ryan like helps Pittman, no question. But I don't know if it's that big a boost for him. 9 targets last week against a bad Raiders defense, and he turned it into 7 catches for 53 yards. So he didn't really cash in. I like the player so much. I really like Pittman. I went into the season optimistic that Matt Ryan was going to be the guy who helped Pittman ball out. And I'm no longer that optimistic about Matt Ryan being able to elevate Pittman. Ryan just sort of throws to the open receiver too. And we've seen Paris Campbell really come on of late. So I don't know if we can even count on Pittman getting like the 8+ targets a game that he was getting early in the year with Matt Ryan. And the matchup is just bad. You mentioned it, Joe. I mean, the excellent Eagles outside cornerback duo of Darius Slayton and James Bradbury. And they are going to be upset after
Jackson, too. Let's not forget that guy who just picks off everything lately.
Yeah, and they just kind of got exposed a little bit by Terry McLaurin, and they lost their first game of the year. I think they are going to be,
man. I told everybody on the BP show, man, these in-division games, the night games when we talked about it, and I talked about it on the live stream too, don't count. Like, look at those pay lines. Look at those money lines on those 4-to-1s you're getting on some of these.
It was
these
5 to 1. It
was 5 to 1
on Monday night.
Right. And in Carolina, that was the one we talked about on that show too, about, hey, throw 10, 20 bucks on there because these guys know everyone's watching and they show up for these games. Even the Houston Texans showed up a couple weeks ago on one of these primetime games. So just one of those things you got to keep in mind to watch here. Another one too. This one's really tough because this guy was persona non grata, a week ago. Now Christian Watson was the darling after scoring 3 touchdowns, which helped very little people in fantasy last week, but now everyone's paid for him. You got him as wide receiver 20. Pat's got him as wide receiver 35. ECR is throwing his hands up at 32 saying, I have no idea what to make. Now, look, I know theoretically you can throw in the Titans. I get that, but this is a leap of faith here. I don't think anybody expects him to match the 3 touchdowns, but what is a realistic expectation for Christian Watson in Week 11, Jacob?
Yeah, it's not just the touchdowns. That's the thing with Watson. The usage was there. And he gave Aaron Rodgers every opportunity to not give him that usage. So like Week 10 was Watson's first real chance at a prominent role since Week 1. And you guys might remember that Week 1 was the week where Christian Watson dropped a walk-in 75-yard touchdown on his first NFL target and was basically never heard from again. Yep. So in Week 10, he drops his first target from Aaron Rodgers. Pretty clear drop. His second target is a contested catch opportunity that doesn't come down with. And I'm watching and I'm just like, here we go again. We're just never going to see Christian Watson.
But they did, but he came back to him. 42. I mean, it's not like he's got any choice at this point.
That's true. But yeah, 42% target share for Christian Watson, 3rd highest in the NFL last week, 74% air yardage share. He ran a route on 21 of 23 dropbacks. And the Titans, not only like can you throw on them, you can attack them deep specifically, which is of course great for Watson with his super high average depth of target. They are a pass final defense. They're first in rush defense DVOA. They're 13th versus the pass, and they have the 2nd highest passer rating on passes that have traveled 15 or more air yards. So matchup is great. Opportunity is there. Really talented player. I mean, almost taken in the first round with very little, collegiate pedigree. So I'm super excited about him.
Pat, are you excited about him? Because it was last week just a one-off where Anthony Brown just can't cover anybody and he just burned him every single time. Like, we can't expect that every single week. But what do you think about Christian Watson this week? How comfortable are you starting him?
Not very, but we know, Joe, that this ranking wide receiver 35 is a reflection of my cynicism as a Green Bay Packers fan,
which I continue I
to
continue to love your cynicism as a Packer fan.
It
it gets me up in the morning, to be honest with you.
Man, I just think there's a wide range of outcomes here. Like, I'm excited about the size speed combo. It's almost like a Randy Moss type size speed combo. And I'm not suggesting that Christian Watson is going to be Randy Moss, but there's certainly big play capability here. We saw that last week. It's also exciting that he's paired with Aaron Rodgers, who's, still an elite passer, even if he's not putting up the fantasy numbers this year. And that really Allen Lazard is the only other viable wide receiver in the offense right now. And, Lazard didn't really show up last week. Rodgers was perfectly content throwing to Watson and picking on the matchup, which Rodgers will do. Like, if he gets a matchup he likes, he will go to that well repeatedly. So 8 targets last week. I'm cautiously optimistic that he gets consistent targets from here forward. The matchup against Tennessee looks good. I mean, we know the Titans are much easier to throw on than they are to run on. And, but Watson was a small school guy who didn't put up prolific numbers in college, and he's played 7 NFL games. So, there is a chance that he shows how green he really is. So, man, I'm starting him in one league. I'm dipping a toe into the waters, but I'm a little reluctant to go head first off the 10-meter platform.
Fair enough. All right, let's go to the throwdown here where I bring up a guy that I'm higher on than ECR, and Professor Pat takes me to school about it one way or another. Now, last week, it was Darius Slayton, and Pat said, no, you're too high. And guess what? When I plugged in the numbers, guess whose name popped up again? It was Darius Slayton. Pretty good last week. Good matchup this week against the Lions. I've got him at 22. ECR's at 35. I am all in on Darius Slayton, maybe a little too high. I might have to adjust that as we go. But, Pat, are we selling you on Darius Slayton in week 11 against the Lions a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I'm right on ECR with him, Joe.
Okay.
And maybe he does smash. I mean, we know that the Lions have been a really favorable matchup for opposing wide receivers. Although our guy, Bo McBrayer at FantasyPros, pointed out to me that, a lot of that is going to slot receivers. Like, the Lions zone scheme kind of funnels things toward the slot a lot of the times. And he thinks it's a Wandale week. So, we'll see about that. Yeah, I mean, I've got him towards the bottom of this tier that he is on, along with Kadarius Toney, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Christian Watson, Drake London. Man, he is just going to be kind of a borderline start-sit guy for me.
All right, let's get to the next one here, and it's our listener mailbag. Again, fantasypros.com/chat. It's free to join, but if you upgrade over at fantasypros.com/offers, you get access to our AMAs, our stages, and a whole lot more. This one's from the Good Squire. 10-man PPR. Should I trade A.J. Brown and Joe Mixon for Jeff Wilson Jr. and Mark Andrews? My other wide receivers are Jalen Waddle, Justin Jefferson, and the tight end is Komet. I think this trade makes me better overall, but not sure. All right, Jacob, what do you think about this deal? You want A.J. Brown, Joe Mixon, or Jeff Wilson and Mark Andrews rest of season?
It sure seems like A.J. Brown and Joe Mixon. I love Mark Andrews, but I think that's tough to turn down.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Pat, do you agree as well?
I kind of do. I mean, it seems like that would just gut his depth. And we still got, if you're going to the championship game, that would be 7 more weeks to go and, at least 4 or 5 more weeks to go. So that's a long way to go with a thin bench, a wide receiver and running back. So especially with Cole Kmet coming on. So I mean, Komet's not going to give you Mark
tight
Andrews
end 7, Cole Komet? Tight end 7, man. Cole Komet. What a difference a month makes. Unbelievable. Jacob Gibbs, everybody, go check out his great work at CBS Fantasy and SportsLine. Go follow him on the Twitter machine at JAGibbs_23. Jacob, it's always a pleasure having you. Thanks for joining us in season. I know it's a tough thing to do. That'll do it for us, but the story of the game goes on. For Pat Fitzmaurice and Jacob Gibbs, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros. so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.